It's been a busy week, really busy week. Trump's out there. He's really busy. He's making headlines every couple hours. So to kick off that news cycle this week, it was actually someone else. So down in Colombia, the Colombian president sent out this X post on Sunday morning, very late Saturday night. And he basically said that the Colombian government is not going to accept some of the deportees that the Trump administration has been sending back to them. He basically said that whenever he sent this, the main thing that he pointed to was that he was unhappy with how the criminals were being treated. He was saying that they were in like handcuffs and leg shackles, and he said it was inhumane. And as a result, he said that's too far. We're not going to accept them. So I don't know what you think Trump's response might have been, but a few hours later in the day, he comes out swinging. So more or less up top, he acknowledges what he's saying. And then he says, directed my administration to immediately take the following urgent and decisive retaliatory measures. Emergency 25% tariffs on all goods coming into the U.S. In 1 week, the 25% tariffs will be increased to 50%. So right off the bat, everyone's talking about this targeted versus across the board tariffs. He doesn't really seem to care that much. 25% across the board. It's going to be 50 soon after. So right there, that's like pretty shocking already. And then in addition to that, he's got all of these other things as well. Travel ban, visa revocations on Colombian government officials, visa sanctions on party members and basically anyone that associates with the Colombian government, enhanced customs border control, all of these different things. It was really quite surprising just kind of how this turned out. I don't think anyone thought that he would start using this kind of blunt of a stick towards basically any other country. He focused on Canada and Mexico at the start, saying 25%. But he's, like we were saying last week, he's been notably silent on basically anywhere else. So we saw here, though, if you do something he doesn't like, he's going to come out hours later with something very drastic.
He's thrown his way. Well, a couple things. I mean, certainly it feels like we are not being run by a committee anymore. It's definitely being run by one person. And you can get these decisions out as quickly. He might have talked to 2-3 people or something, as opposed to sitting down discussing with the entire State Department or something, or putting up a memo or trying to figure out how this might impact the economy or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's like Biden would have
the
came back
speed
in 3
was
weeks.
Shocking. Yeah. The speed is shocking. I mean, you would imagine this is what it feels like to be run by like an executive.
Right. It's like
someone making the decision
here.
Yeah. That's different. The other thing is the willingness to throw his weight around. I mean, that's new. That was like a wake-up call. Definitely. You don't play nice in the sandbox. Just comes out swinging. That's international politics. This is the other thing that really struck me is like I have a little bit of a international relations background, and the very first course that they make you take is conceptual foundations. And one of the things they lay out are the broad theories of international relations, and there's 3 of them. I'll talk about like 2. One is the liberal one, and the other one is the realists. These are sort of the 2 that are kind of most stark in contention with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the realists argue that on the international playing field, it's all about power, right? And whereas liberals would more kind of go to a should be like cooperation through shared institutions.
Let's all get along.
Yeah. And he definitely feels like a realist.
He's a realist.
Power. He's a realist.
I don't think anyone
would doubt he's a realist. We're back in power politics. Now, to be totally frank, I think that on the I'm on the global scale, I think it is a matter of power politics. And I think liberals, the liberal view has a tendency to be taken advantage of by the realists. So I'm thinking like Russia and China. They're on the Security Council, and then they can like veto actions by the Security Council against actions that their own country have taken. I mean, they're just being the liberal institution is just being taken advantage of.
Right.
Totally. I mean, you can imagine. Anyway.
Yeah. Exactly. Like if you're thinking about two countries, one with a realist in charge, another with liberals, the realist comes out with something very fast, very harsh all of a sudden, and then it comes back to the liberal, the kind of rule by committee. You sit down, you talk about it for a while, you think about, oh, well, instead of 25%, how about 20%? Like, okay, is that a victory? I don't think so. They're still coming out hard at you.
We got to get the clip of is you just reminded me, Team America World Police. Where like the UN representative or something comes up to him and he's like, if you don't do what we say, we're going to write you a letter. And that letter is going to be a really mean letter.
We'll write you a letter. We'll be very angry. We'll write you a letter telling you how angry we are.
That's what it is. Yeah, you got the lines right. Yeah, that's it. That's kind of how it feels sometimes.
So then in this situation, then it makes you wonder, or, then naturally, what happened after this? And I was not surprised by the result, but a couple hours later, the Colombian president had another ex post basically conceding, more or less. He just gave it up in a matter of hours. And then here's just the official statement, agreed to all of his terms.
Yeah, so to be clear, these are not the Colombian president's words. This is the Trump said.
Oh yeah, this is from
Trump went ahead and said we're the greatest. Fiercely protect our nation's sovereignty. Other nations in the world
make clear
that's
the
what
world,
it is.
Or makes clear to the world that America is respected again.
Yeah.
So that definitely is right there in that realist camp. If someone rules very strongly and harshly like that, you're kind of forced into, I don't know, bending to the will a little bit. Is that respect? I'm not sure, but
yeah, respect has different meanings. There's the civil definition of respect, and then there's the authority.
Yeah. So this definitely sounds
authoritative. You're leaning more towards they will respect our power, essentially.
Yeah,
it's not
definitely.
Like that would be civil and nice. I don't think civility maybe is not one of Trump's defining features.
I don't think he knows what that word means.
Right. But hey.
But yeah, so this is next step in the tariff policy saga. We still have yet to get any concrete details on some of the other big ones he said. So meaning Canada and Mexico, there's still no, he said February 1st, which is in 2 days from now, from time of recording here. No one really knows if that's going to happen, how it's going to happen still, and then really not a word yet, even on China at all. So still a very uncertain situation at this point, but definitely catching a lot of attention. I don't think anyone thought he was bluffing, a week or two ago, but something like this, I think, just makes it very, very plainly clear that there's no bluffing going on. Like
right.
These tools will be used.
Yeah. He was president for 4 years, and then he had another 4 years to reflect. And now it feels like he's putting whatever lessons that he's learned to use, don't dilly dally.
He's moving very quickly.
Yeah.
So most concretely, that's what we've got on tariffs this week. That said, that wasn't the only story in the news here. Certainly outside of politics and economics, it's been a super busy week just in terms of other policies going on and just around the world. But also within finance and economics, it was a very packed schedule this week as well. So most notably, kind of headline in the U.S. here, the FOMC, the Fed, they had their next bi-quarterly meeting. And so that just finished up this past Wednesday here. And so that one, overall, it was just really a big snoozer. Really nothing happened. But at the same time, really no one was expecting anything to happen, just because, generally speaking, the past couple of months of economic data related to GDP growth and inflation and the labor market, they've all been pretty okay. And so from a stability standpoint where the Fed wants to be, that's a pretty good place to be. So as a result, no one really expected them to cut again, in contrast to the past 3 meetings consecutively. They were cutting. So this is seen as, while they didn't kind of do anything, they did something by doing nothing. So signaling in some way, at least, that maybe they're done cutting for a little while. And so in the press statement here, so whenever they finish their meeting at 2 p.m. on Wednesday.
It's always 2 p.m. It's always Wednesday. Right?
Yeah, it's always on a Wednesday. It's always at 2 p.m. And so they send out this press release here. Well, the FOMC statement. And so what people do, and so this is all very canned language. So what people commonly do is they do this kind of like Microsoft Word track changes thing with the previous one, just so you can see which precise words got changed.
Not a whole lot.
Yeah, really not much at all.
We've seen single words like move markets.
Yeah, so they're actually so just kind of glancing at this, skipping over the first paragraph for just a minute, it's like you look down a little bit, the third paragraph, they changed lower to maintain, and then, just saying they didn't cut, and then the bottom, they just changed the names because it's a new year and they switched who's on the committee. So that's nothing. And then so the only thing that they did change is recent indicators suggest economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. The unemployment rate has stabilized at a low level in recent months, and labor market conditions remain solid. Inflation remains somewhat elevated. The big change that people zeroed in on was that they changed that line on inflation. So previously, they said inflation has made progress towards the committee's 2% objective, but remains somewhat elevated. So this time they didn't say we're making progress. They just said labor market solid, inflation's still too high though. So people took that as a sign that, so you're not going to cut it all anymore. Might you even raise rates? Under the assumption that this means that they're becoming more concerned about inflation. And so naturally, with everything that's going on, you hear tariffs, you think inflation, you see inflation, you think tariffs. So that was one of the big themes within the press conference that then happened thereafter. So they have this written press release here. They do at 2 p.m. and then always 30 minutes later at 2:30, Jay Powell goes out in front of the press and then just takes questions for 30 or 45 minutes or so. And so as I was just saying, that bit on inflation, that was like instantly top of everyone's mind, really, because there's really nothing else to see here. And so people asked about that. He's a lawyer by training, so he speaks very precisely. He speaks very lawyerly. And so I would have thought that he would had been anticipating this and have something, material about it to say, but he said that you shouldn't take any indication from that we have changed our view on inflation in any way. In fact, this was just language cleanup is what he called it. He said this is purely a
You guys need to find a hobby or something, okay?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
What he's saying.
So that's what he was but then
you guys need to chill the F out, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that was really the tone, because everyone was asking.
Just completely rewrite it. That would be fun. If just one time they just came out and it's totally rewritten, everyone's heads would explode.
That does happen. You try to avoid that happening, so obviously
didn't even know what to ask.
COVID began, the last meeting before COVID and then the first one after, pretty crazy differences. But then during that press conference, so a lot of people were focusing on this inflation bit and then naturally into the tariff bit. And so he usually gives very, very well thought out, pretty concise answers. But ever since Trump has been elected, he's been much dodgier in some of his answers. So anything that starts to touch on politics in any way, really, so tariffs in this situation, he just waves it away, more or less saying that we don't know what it's going to be yet. There's significant uncertainty. It's not our job to evaluate potential policy that might come out from the government. But yeah, so just to give a little example, one of the highlights directly about tariffs, this is what he had to say.
What do you think might be different this time around?
Just talking about
secondly,
tariffs.
Tiff Macklem said there was no doubt that the threat of tariffs was a big driver of the cut by the Bank of Canada today. What sort of information would the Fed need to see on tariffs before it was willing to take such a preemptive move? Thank you.
So first of all, things are a little different now. We've just come through a high inflation period, and you can argue that both ways. You can say that companies have figured out that they do like to raise prices, but we also hear a lot from companies these days that consumers have really had it with price increases. And so I don't know how that shakes out. Nonetheless, you're coming through a situation where we're not quite back to 2%, and that's just different. In addition, the kind of footprint of trade has changed a lot as trade is now spread around. It's not as concentrated in China as it was. There's a lot more manufacturing. It moved to Mexico and other places. So there are differences, and I just think the range of possibilities is very, very wide. We just don't know, and I don't want to start speculating, as tempting as it is, because we really don't know, and we didn't know, by the way, in 2000 and I guess 18. We didn't really know, and the range of possibilities very, very wide. We don't know what's going to be tariffed. We don't know for how long or how much, what countries. We don't know about retaliation. We don't know how it's going to transmit through the economy to consumers. That really does remain to be seen. There are lots of places where that price increase from the tariff can show up between the manufacturer and the consumer. Just so many variables. So we're just going to have to wait and see. And the best we can do is what we've done, which is study up on this and look at historical experience, read the literature, and think about the factors that might matter. And then we'll just have to see how it goes.
The question was like, what would you need to see before you started taking action? And he started talking about how tricky tariffs are in 2018, and we didn't know. And so I guess that's the hand waving you were talking about.
Yeah, that was definitely some of the kind of
that was the hand waving you're talking about.
Bit. And in fact,
just take one step to the side and then start talking about the next thing that pops into your head.
Yeah, pretty much. And like I thought it was slightly out of character for him. Even
Really?
He was starting to look like a little bit flustered. Even I thought. I mean. That was most of the way through the press conference, and he had kind of said as much 4 or 5 other times already. Just, we don't know. We're watching and waiting, wait and see mode, he kept saying. But that last one I felt kind of encapsulated the, where we're at today and then how they're thinking about it.
When's his term up? Was it like 2026? Is that how it works?
26, yes.
26.
So they're on 4-year terms.
And they alternate.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard that Trump recently was criticizing the Fed. Thought they did a bad job, both with inflation and with regulation, banking regulations. That's my sphere. I used to work for the Fed and supervision.
Yeah, Trump has never been happy with the Fed. He's only happy with them whenever they cut rates, he's in office, and it results in the stock market going up. Every other time, he doesn't like them. Like you're saying, he doesn't like the regulation. He needs, anyone that he can blame about inflation, he will. It's typically Biden, but that's just another thing that he can knock the Fed about. Right. And for good reason. Whenever inflation was beginning, the word of the month at that time was transitory. This inflation is transitory. It's going to go down. So that arguably was
that's a pretty black eye, come to think of it.
Definitely. Yeah. And so at this point, also, interest rates are pretty high. All else equal, lower rates are going to be better for the economy. So if they're not lowering, Trump is going to be upset with that. And he's made a bunch of comments now that he wants to see lower interest rates. I'm not going to fire Powell, but I'm going to keep saying, would you lower interest rates already is effectively what he's been doing. And he's probably just going to do it continuously now. But hopefully they don't bend under pressure, but we'll see. That said, a couple of the other things I wanted to share real quick. At the beginning of that question, that woman actually made a comment about Tiff Macklem. He's the Bank of Canada governor. So he's basically Jay Powell's equivalent over in Canada. And earlier that same day, the Bank of Canada had their meeting and their, communications and all that kind of thing. And so Canada did end up cutting interest rates. And I just wanted to show what he was quoted saying with regards to tariffs and inflation and that sort of thing. He came out and said, a long-lasting and broad-based trade conflict would badly hurt economic activity in Canada. At the same time, the higher cost of imported goods will put direct upward pressure on inflation. Unfortunately, tariffs mean economies simply work less efficiently. We produce and earn less than without tariffs. And so that was cited as well as one of the key reasons why they cut interest rates at that meeting, which is, I don't know, kind of funny to me because nothing has been implemented yet. This is a few days after we saw that Colombia episode where, sure, the threat is very intense, but it also, could be backed off just as quickly.
That's interesting.
So,
yeah, because, he did say this would be entirely political and the interest rate. So, I guess tariffs can come down and be taken away very quickly, whereas the effective interest rates take a lot longer.
Right.
So maybe they expect, maybe this could be a nod towards just me listening, towards them thinking that they will engage in a trade war and they expect this to be prolonged as opposed to their giving in.
Yeah, and that's basically what they did. So I think even looking at this here, it says the Bank of Canada published a hypothetical but grim scenario where the U.S. imposes permanent 25% levies on all goods. So yeah, definitely to some level, they are concretely planning for some range of scenarios, including permanent 25% tariffs.
Yeah.
Wait till you see their faces whenever that gets bumped up to 50.
Yeah, right. Hey, you can do 150. Nothing's stopping you from going over 100.
And then on the topic of central banks and tariffs, last thing I'll mention here is, so that was Wednesday. That was yesterday. So it's Thursday today as we're doing this. But today on Thursday, the European Central Bank, they had their meeting as well. So it was a busy week in terms of central banks too. So the European Central Bank, they also cut rates again by 25 basis points. Just for context, at this point now, the Fed has cut by 100 basis points over, I believe, 3 cuts. And the ECB now has done 125, so they've passed up the Fed, but they've done it in a more gradual way. They've done it over 5 cuts so far. So they do the same thing. They release some statements saying what they did, and then afterwards, the head of the ECB, this is Christine Lagarde, she comes out and gives her press conference as well. So they hit her with questions, and then so I wanted to highlight one of the responses surrounding tariffs.
We are mission driven. The second question you had related to tariff. As I said earlier on, for the moment, there is nothing that we can actually capture in terms of policy determination, in terms of numbers, in terms of scope, in terms of custom line items to understand exactly what is considered. When that happens, then of course it will enter into our assessment and into the macroeconomic analysis that is produced by our staff. But it's far more complicated than it's this way or this way. It's inflationary or deflationary, depending on whether there is one set of decisions with variable rates around the world, rerouting of trade, whether there is retaliation or not. All we know for sure is that it will have a global negative impact. A global negative impact.
All we know for sure is that there will be a global negative economic impact. Then she said that twice. That was very strong to me. And it was also kind of funny because for one thing, she also was starting to look a little flustered up there, didn't really kind of paused a few times, felt like she didn't know exactly where she was going with it. But she highlighted all of the uncertainties involved, much like Powell did, but then finishes her thought by saying, but it will certainly be negative for the global economic activity. I mean, could you dream up a scenario where, you've got a short-term blip here, but then it ends up helpfully normalizing trade in some way? I think it's possible, but she seemed very confident that it's only going to be a net negative, and they seem to be quite concerned about it as well. And so again, Trump has not even yet said anything about tariffs related to Europe in any way, but everyone is on edge. Everyone's concerned about it. The ECB cut rates as well. They did it for kind of economic growth reasons, but tariffs were definitely in the back of their mind somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess my initial reaction, one of the first things that occurred to me was that we have to put all these tiny little variables into our economic models, and we won't know. It's extremely complicated. Kind of got the sense you're not going to understand. It's, this is beyond you. We'll feel. But I heard that, and I also sort of know that they very much just look at the data that's already come out and then make the decision. Whereas her posture was sort of, we need to know specifically what the plans are, and then we put it on our models and we make some sort of prediction, as opposed to what I think really happens, which is, well, they see what's already happening in the rear view mirror, and then they make the decision.
Right.
So
and it's it's. Like
I didn't like
the
this is too complicated for you vibe, and I didn't really like the we are very much forward looking. Although, admittedly, I don't really follow the European Central Bank a whole lot. Maybe they do that. I don't know, but
it's very much like the Fed, and like within that same press conference, at length she kept talking about. So in response to other questions that had uncertainties like this, she kept saying, "We are data dependent. We see the data come out and we react to it."
Yeah, well, that's true.
Like you were just
that
saying,
is reactive, though. Yeah,
there's
reactive.
a bit of a difference to how she was characterizing.
They're probably reactive.
Yeah.
Although to be fair to the Bank of Canada, that was a proactive decision.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To be fair. But then as for like, will this hurt global? I think I sort of want to come to her defense. Like on some level, depending on how you think about it, that's probably accurate to say that whatever tariffs are going to hurt the like the absolute numbers, but Trump is not interested in the absolute numbers. He's really interested in, in the mandate, which is to help, the people who felt like they've been left behind by globalism. So maybe, global,
economy.
Global, and certain specific parts of the American economy, to be even more precise. That's what he's interested in. He's not interested in the global economy. I don't know. We went over this.
Should the ECB be concerned about the global economy? I don't know.
True. That's the. Yes, there was definitely an opinion in there. That's a good point. As opposed to just like, where are we gonna put our benchmark rate?
Like that. That'd be much more
I
reasonable
gotta
to say, I would think.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting pings. Pings.
That's all I've got here.
All right. Thanks.
This story's definitely not over, and we'll be back next week with whatever next chapter comes out.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for clicking the link. We'll see you next time.
Right here on the Root of All Evil podcast.
Bye.
See ya.